the YouTube stream. And we're live. Okay, so we're now live on YouTube and Discord. Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining. This is our 15th or 16th community call. I'm not exactly sure. I know I said the number a while ago, but I think we skipped one, so it might be the number 15. And today for our community call, we are receiving Nathan and Orlando from Snapshot. So actually, we are going to talk about Snapshot, StarkNet, and what happens when you mix both. And it actually comes right on the hill. I think I saw the tweet like a few minutes ago announcing a partnership, right, Nathan?
Yeah, absolutely. I was super happy to announce, kind of formalize something that I think was a very.
You should unmute yourself on the Discord.
It doesn't work on Discord.
People can't hear you.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm unmuted.
There's going to be a Larson.
Oh, I'm getting a huge echo.
Yeah. Do you have headphones, maybe?
Sorry, I can't really understand you because like too much echo.
You don't have headphones.
Oh yeah, I have headphones.
You should put them on. All right. Let's try now. Can you say a few words?
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's much better. So
all good.
I was just going to say, yeah, absolutely super happy for that partnership announcement. I think it was something very kind of that was happening in the background for a long time, and putting words on it is very cool. We're like very much honored to be part of this big adventure. I think everyone here in the community call really kind of feels the vibe of this early adventure, and yeah, super
very
happy.
cool. So can you tell us a bit more, like what words exactly are we putting on? Like what does a partnership mean?
I think strategic partnership is just to qualify us for the super secret airdrop. No, I'm kidding. I'm gonna be fired after 2 minutes on the Starknet Community call. I'm really sorry. So no, it's mostly about I think we're building a solution on Starknet that will allow this kind of massive decentralized organizations to have a governance that works, that functions well, and a way to kind of work together, ruled by very clear rules. And I think in the future, this is something that Starkware and Starknet themselves can use to talk about next protocol upgrades and these kind of very big decisions. And on our side, it's also because, well, we really love building on Starknet. So maybe we'll talk a little bit about more about that later, but we even have other things than Snapshot X planned for Starknet. So for us, it's kind of like a commitment to continue building out in this ecosystem and to kind of like take this.
Okay, so it's kind of like okay, so we've been working together for a while. Let's make it official. We're happy to work together, and all is nice. Very cool. So we had some content a while back about Snapshot X, and I think a decent number of people might be comfortable or understand what it is, but probably a lot of newcomers also are not very familiar with well, Snapshot and Snapshot X actually. So could you present in a few words what Snapshot is? And then after we can move to what Snapshot X might be.
Yeah, so Snapshot is basically a tool that DAOs and any kind of decentralized organizations can use to vote. It is very focused on that one vertical. You get to vote on the things that matter to you in the communities that matter to you. And that can be very social DAOs. It can be, small groups of people building together and that want to have this kind of accountability and transparency on the way they make decisions. But it can also be for much bigger groups. I mean, there's, DeFi protocols. Uniswap has about 50,000 members who can be called upon to pull and ask their opinion for a certain subject on Snapshot. And Snapshot has been around for around 2 years. It was kind of born during DeFi summer because the gas fees got really high. And basically we needed a new option to vote that didn't cost any money. So Snapshot was built with that in mind by the Balancer team and by Fabien, the founder of Snapshot, who was part of the Balancer team. And basically what the Balancer team was thinking is, well, we built this really cool product, but now people with their tokens in liquidity pool, they don't actually get to also vote with those tokens. They have to choose between using the product and voting with it. And they decided, all right, we need a way to be able to vote with tokens in liquidity pool. And that's kind of how Snapshot was born. And I think very quickly it found this product market fit with the high gas fees, with the composability and flexibility that are so important to crypto. And so today there's around I think there's around 7,000 spaces on Snapshot. Now, a lot of those spaces are not monthly active and everything, but I think I can confidently say we have around 2,000 communities kind of living, voting, and and making decisions together on Snapshot. And yeah, super happy about that.
It must have been a really interesting 2 years because, I mean, Snapshot is, from what you're saying, 2 years is a small time. And it feels like Snapshot is everywhere. So handling this kind of growth must have been a very interesting adventure. How many people are working at Snapshot currently?
I think we're 11 people, but it's a very kind of open culture, a very open organizations. I think that most devs, until quite recently, all of our devs, they were all past contributors that just kind of found the project, found the idea super interesting, found the mission really, really cool, and then started working on a few issues. And then, a few months in, they were full-time contributors. And this is kind of how we function. It's a very kind of community-driven idea and community-driven community over at Snapshot. So the growth has been crazy, but it's because I think the product is it's a very useful product that doesn't really try to make any money, where Snapshot doesn't really sell you anything. You come on in. The only moment where you'll pay fees is kind of the registry of Snapshot works with ENS. So you need an ENS name, and you need to link your ENS name with your Snapshot space. But that's it. There's no ads. There's no data harvesting. None of that stuff. So I think it's quite interesting as a product, because it's just kind of empowering for DAOs, I think.
And something I really like about Snapshot also is that, I mean, the idea of Snapshot. So basically, when you vote on a proposal on Snapshot, you're signing a message, right? And this message is basically, it lives off chain. It doesn't have an impact on any kind of smart contract. It's just a way to do signaling. And it's not entirely trustless because it can be censored or anything. And so, what I really like about your product is that it's not perfect in the blockchain sense, in the sense that it's not decentralized, it's not fully trustless and everything, but it solves a very crucial pain point. And this is I think this says a lot about the value you're bringing. It's just basically taking a step out and saying, yeah, what if we did something that was still valuable, we're still able to build something on top of it and bring value, even if it's not fully on chain. And I think that makes it very interesting. There are not a lot of products like that. Oftentimes we try to think in absolute terms. It's either fully decentralized or not, but exploring the balance in between is really interesting. And I think you guys are doing an amazing job at it.
Thank you so much. But as you say, it's not a perfect product. And I think that's why we're here today. We're here to discuss what we think is a really perfect product. So, and I've got some slides prepared for you because I think you touched on something very important there.
Want to share your screen?
Yeah, for sure.
So for the people listening to us on Discord, I posted a link in the community call channel to the YouTube live we're having right now. So you can click there and see Nathan's slide. There's a bit of a delay. There's 20 second delays, whatever. And then you can also ask your questions in the community call channel or there. But take a look. You'll see Nathan's beautiful slides.
All right. And I need just 1 second to reopen Zoom with the new permissions. I'll be back in 1 second.
Sure. So in the meanwhile, we can ask questions to Orlando. Do you want to tell us a story, Orlando? I don't think people can hear you on Discord now. Yeah.
Can you
Cool.
hear me?
Yeah, sure. We can hear you now on both on Zoom and on Discord. So hi, Orlando. Could you present who you are in a few words?
So yeah, I'm Orlando. I'm from the UK, and I sort of joined Snapshot in about December of last year to sort of work on Snapshot X specifically as a Cairo developer. So yeah, I got into StarkNet and developing on StarkNet in sort of November time last year. I built a few sort of hobby projects, and then yeah, Fabian was looking for people to join Snapshot to work on Snapshot X, and I was super excited for that opportunity. And now, yeah, so I've been working on Snapshot X for the past 6 months, and you can see the sort of code I've written in the SX core repo in the Snapshot organization on GitHub.
Very cool. Thank you. And Nathan is back with slides. Nathan,
Yeah,
the floor is yours.
Are we all good?
We are.
Can you see the slide? Perfect. So very like on a very high level, because I think we want to go a little bit more on a call like this over the details rather than over the overall idea. But so a DAO is basically the way that you can see DAOs is the rules are code, and that doesn't mean that it's about code. It's very much about humans DAOs. But the thing is, you create a set of clear rules that allow humans to cooperate in a way where they don't have to, think about, is that person trying to take advantage of me? Is that person really acting honestly in good faith for the good of the DAO? And that's what really strong about DAOs is when the DAO wins, the community wins, and when the community wins, the DAO wins. It's a very powerful loop that can create something very impressive. This is quite a debated subject, but for me, the first DAO is Bitcoin. Bitcoin has a set of very clear rules, and you have different types of actors that gravitate around these rules and Bitcoin. And if everyone acts in good faith, they're rewarded by the system. If you act in bad faith, you're slashed, or you lose out by acting in bad faith in a way that's so strong. I think in many ways that this strongly discourages bad faith actors. And we've seen the success of Bitcoin over the last 10 years. It is when DAOs work well, they work really, really well. So basically, in terms of if you want to build governance tooling for DAOs, you kind of face a trilemma in the same way that you've got this blockchain trilemma. And the 3 points are, you want your DAO to, your governance and your votes to be cheap. You want them to be extremely secure, and you want them to be really flexible. By flexible, I mean you're able to vote with NFTs, you're able to vote with, staked tokens, tokens on multiple chains. That these are all quite important. And so Snapshot at the moment, that's the first triangle that we're showing. Snapshot is, it's free. It's extremely flexible because of its kind of hybrid on-chain, off-chain architecture. And the problem is, as you were pointing out, is not as secure as governance on layer one, like a compound governor, contract. This is the most secure you can go. However, that's going to cost you a lot of money, so that's going to exclude a lot of people from the governance process, which I think is exactly what you want to avoid. And you're not very flexible in terms of what you can ask of such a contract. And so that's what kind of the idea behind Snapshot X. The idea behind Snapshot X is, well, with layer two, not only can we make it as secure as layer one, but we can drastically reduce the cost of voting. Right now, we're expecting 50 to 70x, but as you all know, like the way ZK worlds work is the more people use them, the more people do a certain transactions, the cheaper it gets for people. So I'm very wary personally of saying this is what a vote on Snapshot X is going to cost, because I think it could be extremely low, in the long term. And in terms of flexibility, well, you get a lot more options with Snapshot X than governance on L1 because of certain tools that have been developed that are incredibly interesting, but kind of not the subject of this talk. Things like Fossil, this will allow for much more flexibility in terms of what we look at for governance power and for voting power. And this is key, because I think like a lot of the talk around the voting today is centered around this idea of token voting sucks. One token, one vote kind of sucks. It means that very often you're going to be stuck with plutocracy and whales. And this is not bad per se, But if you want governance to be inclusive, you need even smaller holders to feel included in your process. So you want things to be super cheap, reduce the barrier of entry to the maximum, and you want it to be really flexible and to be able to, derive voting power from many different things. What we decided as well when we started thinking about Snapshot X is, there's some things that are key to your identity as a project. And for Snapshot, it was clear for us that what was key about Snapshot was free. It's made for people. It's not made for, to make any money on top of it. It's made for communities to make decisions in the best way possible by being as inclusive as possible. So what we decided to do is say, well, instead of asking individual users to pay for the really low fees, we're going to ask DAOs to pay for the really low fees. Because when you think about it, if a vote on mainnet right now is $10, and for the first version of Snapshot, we managed to 20 cents per vote. Well, 20 cents, it's something. It's not zero. And if you're Uniswap and you've got 1,000 people voting, that means, $200. Well, you'd rather pay $200 for your users not to have to pay anything than, ask your users to pay and maybe get less of their input. So we think that's a very manageable cost for DAOs, and that DAOs will be happy to kind of foot the bill on this one.
That's interesting. It's kind of the same way when you go on vote in real life with a piece of paper, you don't pay for the piece of paper or for the envelope you put it in. It's paid globally, collectively by the collective. So it's basically having that same logic. It's free to exercise your vote, to exercise your vote as a citizen, and it's taken care of by the collective. Interesting.
Absolutely. And I think this goes a little bit more into detail, but Snapshot X is going to be its own independent contract on chain. So if you want to build a front end to Snapshot X, which asks, regular users to pay for votes, you can do that as well. The front end that we'll build will be with this formula of DAOs having to foot the bill, but there's not even a requirement. It's just what we believe is right. But a key part of the philosophy is not saying, well, we believe that's right, so that's how it will happen. It's simply, we believe that's how it should be done, and that's what our front end is going to look like. The back end doesn't care. You can, create whatever system you want on top of it. So I think I can skip the what is Starknet part of this of these slides, because I think we have I think it's very realistic that 90% of people in following this community will know better than myself what is Starknet and how Starknet works. But something that's really key and important to what we're doing, and I think we'll talk about that in more details after, is Starknet really allows things that were impossible on mainnet. Checking storage proofs is something so computationally intensive that if we had to do it on mainnet, this would represent crazy amounts of money. So this is the really interesting part, I think, about layer 2s and about Starknet in particular, is not you can do the same things but cheaper. It's you can do things that were just impossible and unimaginable before.
You mentioned storage proof twice. Maybe that's worth defining a bit, because I'm sure some people in the audience are familiar, but it never hurts to explain it again. Do you want me to do it, or?
Yeah, no, please do it.
Cool. So, okay, basically, why are snapshot signature not really usable on L1? Well, basically, your smart contract on L1 could take the signature and infer some information from it, but this would be computationally intensive, and this would cost you a lot of money in gas. The cool thing about Starknet is that compute is very, very cheap. So you could do the same thing. You could take the signature, interpret it, and then this would be cheap. So you get the insight of what this person signed. If you want to assign a voting power to this person, you still need to know if she possesses an NFT or has a certain amount of token or this kind of stuff. So basically, Starknet needs to know what is happening on L1 at a given block. There are various ways you could do that. You could send a message from L1 to L2, but this is costly also. So this is where storage proofs come in. And storage proof is basically taking the same approach. Hey, you know that compute is cheap on Starknet. Well, taking the content of the state of L1 of Ethereum at a given height and drilling down through it to see what is inside of it is not difficult to do by a computer. Your computer can do it. but it's difficult to do inside of smart contract. But it's cheap to do inside of StarkNet. So basically, we take a storage state at some point, and we import it in StarkNet, and then extract data from it. That's what we call storage proof. And it basically allows you to extract data from a given height in Ethereum and then use it as an input to your program. So in that case, it would be your snapshot signature and the number of token or the NFT you possess or your or whatever other insight you want to take from the main chain.
Yeah, and the really cool part is that you don't have to trust anyone to do this. There's not an oracle that's necessary that you have to trust is going to relay the right information. You don't have to trust anything. It's all, let's say, internal to how StarkNet works. So
yeah, that's kind of what is cool. Also, we were mentioning the first iteration. I mean, Snapshot right now is kind of it's less decentralized than you'd wish because signatures can be shown or not shown, and token votes are basically inputs from an operator. In this case, you get rid of all of this. You get the signature and you know they're valid, and you take the token balance and you know they're valid without having an intermediary. So it basically, I really like the fact that it's kind of like, to me, it feels like, the Voyager probes we sent in outer space 50 years ago. Maybe eventually we'll catch up to them with a faster spaceship, and then we'll be able to just maybe, I don't know, take them and throw them even further. And that's kind of what it is. You guys iterated with a product, you shipped something, it proved extremely useful, and now technology is catching up and giving it teeth and way more power. And I think there's a lesson to learn here. I'm not sure exactly what it is, but maybe ship something useful, even if it's not perfect.
Yeah, I think this is a very big thing. Like, don't be scared to ship your MVP, because that's the only way you're going to know if this is useful, if this is something that people want to use or not. And you can't guess about product market fit that much. Like, sometimes the market is very, divided, and you don't know if this is going to work out or not. And then you release something and it works immensely well. And I think, Snapshot is a good example in the sense that it was originally for Balancer. And then from there, everyone started thinking, maybe I can use this actually, maybe this works for me too. And I think that's how a lot of good products kind of grow at the beginning. So yeah, in general, I want to talk a little bit about what this new, better spaceship is going to look like. I think the big idea that we have behind it is we want to make it super modular. We want to make it super. We continue to believe that the best way to bring out a product that works well and that people like is simply by letting them customize it to their exact needs. DAOs, it's such a new and young ecosystem, and there's so much going on in DAOs right now. So many inventive people trying to, do everything from buying a football club to, running a decentralized protocol. And you need something that doesn't, not a one size fits all. So this is kind of how we're thinking about it. You're going to have your very basic space parameters, and then you're going to have 3 different kinds of strategies that you attach on top of them. But don't worry, it's still going to be easy to set up. It's a little bit like Legos, as you will see in the presentation. So your space parameters, they're really simple. It's simply saying who's the controller, who controls the space parameters, who can change them, update them, add administrators, add authors, and then you're going to have your proposal threshold. And your proposal threshold is, well, how many tokens, how much voting power does a user need to be able to propose something in my space? Your quorum is going to be the number of votes, the amount of voting power that you need for a proposal to pass. Your voting period is the time of the vote, and your voting delay is how much time between the end of the vote and the execution of the vote. And on top of that, you're going to have all different kinds of authenticator. And this is a really cool part, because I'm extremely bullish on DAOs on StarkNet. I think that I just saw a new one pop up that was about like building DeFi tools that I thought was super interesting. But I'm thinking immediately of stuff like Matchbox DAO. Like, I think there will be a lot of demand internal to StarkNet, but many DAOs kind of want to execute on StarkNet and do their computation, do their governance on StarkNet, but have their funds and have the head, let's say, of their DAO on layer 1. not really the head actually, but more like the funds. And
the muscle, the head on StarkNet and the muscle on L1.
Yeah, maybe that's a better one. But StarkNet is also kind of the muscle. So I need to rethink that metaphor. I'll come back to the next community call with a better one. But basically, you're going to be able to vote with like an Ethereum signature, and the Ethereum signature will be verified on StarkNet. And also, this will not be done in a way that is relying on an oracle or something. This will be done kind of naturally through and trustlessly. I think trustlessly being the very important one. But you've got many different types of authentication. You can also sign a message on StarkNet. That's obviously the fastest and easiest way for us to verify. But you could also do an Ethereum transaction, or you could also sign on another chain. Well, EVM chains are going to be easier because once you've made it work for Ethereum signatures, it's easier to make it work for other EVM chains. But in general, you could think in time, if you manage to find a way to verify a Solana signature, then maybe your Solana DAO is capable of having all of its computation and governance happen on StarkNet without the user even knowing. This is kind of the part that we wanted to recreate from the Snapshot experience, which is no matter which chain you're on, you're connecting to Snapshot in the way you'd rather. You sign a message, it's always free. And where the calculations happen, where we calculate the results, calculate the votes, store the votes, that doesn't really matter to you. You just have the results show up, and all of this kind of back-end part, that's what's going to be on StarkNet. So you can authenticate pretty much however you want, and then there's different voting strategies. And I think that's kind of key to like the offer. Is we're really big believers in tokens should not be the be-all and all of governance. We want people to be able to vote with NFTs. We want people to be, the whitelist strategy is something I really love. Imagine you have a young Discord and you have like 20 people. Well, what you can do is a whitelist strategy where you add these 20 addresses and you say each of these addresses has, one voting power. And this is awesome because it means that just like that, you have a cryptographically verifiable list of addresses that can have voting power for a certain Snapshot X space. And I think this is really cool. And there's no end really to the kind of voting strategies that you could do. You could totally imagine something like the number of followers on Twitter that you have is your voting power. Or maybe, I don't know if some of you saw the new release of Lens. Maybe Lens is something that could be, I think already on Snapshot, they have a strategy of the amount of people who follow you on Lens is your voting power on a few of the decisions in Lens protocol. And all of this is super inventive, and we really want to encourage that. And that's kind of why we're also coming here to this community call, is because we're super open about building this, and we're looking for input. We're looking for excited people about governance that have cool ideas like that for voting strategies that we did not think of. And I would direct all of you to Orlando's DM. It is a good place to be. And then finally, the last part of your space is going to be your execution strategy. So your execution strategy is when quorum is reached, when you've gotten to a point where the community has accepted a certain decision. Well, you can execute in many different ways. You can execute directly on StarkNet, and again, that's going to be the easiest one to program for us. But you should be able, and you will be able to execute on a multi-sig on L1. You'll be able to execute in any different way you want through some of the tooling already available on Ethereum, because we're realistic on people will maybe not move all their funds to StarkNet day one. So we still want people to be able to use Snapshot X, even if they plan on having part of the DAO on L1. And so that's how it'll work. And I just had a few examples of Legos and DAOs. So this would be a DeFi DAO, for example. And I think something quite interesting about it is that your execution would be a custom handler on Ethereum. So if you think about Curve, for example, Curve has very niche needs in terms of governance. It needs to execute the results of votes in terms of distributing CRV rewards to certain pools on the Curve protocol. Well, this custom handler is something you can absolutely program on Snapshot X. It's an execution strategy that you can program custom made for your particular DAO. And through these different kind of authenticators and voting strategies, you can make it perfectly suited to exactly the needs of your community. A council DAO, I think, is very interesting. And for people who were here in the during the StarkNet hackathon in Amsterdam, this is kind of what we built over that very long Monday and Tuesday. It's basically, if you think about it, if you're looking at the specs here on the screen, this kind of a multi-sig. Your voting strategy is a whitelist. So you're saying these, let's say 7 addresses have 1 voting power. And if at least 5, because your quorum is 5, if at least 5 agree on a decision, then you've got execution, Zodiac on Ethereum, Zodiac on Polygon, on whatever you'd like to execute on. And what's really interesting is that this is a completely trustless way of creating a multi-sig, where where signing transactions, where accepting a certain request on a multi-sig really doesn't cost you that much money. So we're really hoping that this tool, because we really think of Snapshot as a tool, it's going to be useful in loads of different ways for different DAOs. This NFT DAO on Starknet, same. You can also use NFTs as voting strategy, execute directly. All of these are possibly things that you can build custom made for your community. And we're really looking forward to seeing, the release first happen, and then seeing what people come up with this. And if you want to learn more about Snapshot X and you want to check it out, I would really recommend going to docs.snapshotx.xyz. You've got like loads of information there. And I think the GitHub repo, where we're currently kind of centralizing a lot of the code that we have on Snapshot X, is a very good place to look at one of the fastest growing, I'd say, libraries in Cairo right now on GitHub. So really recommend giving it a look. I'll share these links in the chat later. But yeah, that's it from the presentation on Snapshot X that I prepared for you guys.
This is great. Thank you, Nathan. Thanks a lot for your input. So now I'm curious to ask a few questions about Orlando. So Orlando, you wrote the Cairo contract for Snapshot X, right? So you used some fairly advanced mixture of things. You've used storage proofs, you've used the bridge, you've used verifying Ethereum signature. Can you tell us about what's the experience as a dev from using StarkNet and developing code in Cairo? What did you like? What did you not like? Are you familiar with Solidity, or is Cairo your first smart contract language?
Yeah, awesome. So yeah, I was a Solidity dev for a little bit of time before getting into Cairo, but mostly my main experience is with Cairo, to be honest. And yeah, it's definitely a little bit. I would definitely say it's more difficult than Solidity, but I would also say it's more rewarding as a result. And I actually really enjoy the sort of process of it, and it's actually very rewarding to be part of the discussions about the tooling and about the sort of the standards, being part of the new simps. We've just started a repository for that, and it's really cool to be part of that in the early days. Whereas actually, it's not exactly like Ethereum or Solidity. It's sort of old, but it's compared to Cairo, it's a much older, more established ecosystem. And I think it's very exciting for me and a lot of other people to be part of a new ecosystem like this. And I'd just like to point out that actually a lot of the storage proof stuff was done by the Fossil team, by Euler, particularly by Marcello, if any of you are familiar with him. And actually, we're very grateful for their work there, producing this public good for Starknet that we're all using. But yeah, the Ethereum signature verification was another thing that Scott, who's another developer at Snapshot, who's working on Snapshot X with me, was focusing on, and he's in the process of working on that now.
Yeah, that's something that's really cool. I mean, I think there's a sense of community in the StarkNet dev community that is quite strong. I'm not sure it's because the community is small or because the way it grew, but this sense of belonging and being together in the trenches quite strong. I mean, you're not the first one I hear talking about it. I also heard it can be a bit intimidating for new devs because they feel like, oh, but I have a newbie question. Should I ask him? Can I ask them? How was your experience when you were new? Did you feel like intimidated? Did you feel welcome? That was a long time ago. Do you remember?
Yeah, I just sort of asked a few questions on Discord. I thought the Discord was very good and a very high quality Discord, like in the early days for me, and I sort of really enjoyed using that. But I feel like for me, like learning was sort of just a lot of trial and error as well, because like there's not that many people. Like you're not going to be able to find. There's not like a Stack Overflow yet, at least, where you can just sort of find your question answered or copy and paste some code to do something you want to do. So often it is a lot more of a trial and error process. You just got to not be like intimidated by it, and you just got to give it like a few weeks, a couple of months, and then you'll actually start to sort of fit the pieces together, and actually you realize it's not quite so intimidating as you might initially see.
Okay, cool. Very good. Guys, thanks a lot for your presentation. I think we covered most of the topics we wanted to cover. Is there something you guys wanted to talk about that we forgot to mention?
Well, there's definitely like a little thing we wanted to talk about before we but it's not about Snapshot X. It's about something we call Checkpoint, and we're kind of taking this opportunity because Checkpoint is a library for indexing data from StarkNet events and making it really accessible through GraphQL. And Checkpoint is kind of inspired by the graph. It's focused on providing like a similar functionality as the graph, but for StarkNet. And this is still very much an alpha. There's still a lot that we need to work on. But I would love to share a link to a Telegram group that we've created for people who would be interested in participating in kind of fleshing that out. So I'm really sorry about my cough. I don't know exactly where I can post the link to the Telegram group.
So in the community call, post it in Zoom. Perfect. Here. We're in Zoom, and post it here, and I'll repost it in the community calls channel.
Awesome, because I think this will be a super interesting project to kind of cut your teeth on in the Kera ecosystem. And again, like the idea is building it together rather than and building it in public rather than building it really.
Yeah, there's really like I think this is very much the spirit right now in StarkNet. Something is broken, fix it, or if something is missing, build it. Sure, it's going to take you a bit more time, but the reward is pretty cool.
Absolutely.
It's worth it.
So really, thanks so much for having us, Henri.
No, thank you for coming, guys. And I hope to see you again in the future. When do you think we can start using Snapshot X?
Well, it kind of depends. I think 0.9 was a huge milestone for some of the stuff that we're trying to build. So that is absolutely something key to what we want to offer. I think I want to say 2-3 months tops, but then again, I'm seeing Orlando's eyes get closer together when I say this. So let's see. What I should really add is we are recruiting rockstar devs. We are looking for rockstar devs because this is by far the greatest commodity of the 21st century. So if you are super interested in governance, and I think the mission of Snapshot is quite unique. Now we're trying to build a decentralized voting system for crypto. But the point is this decentralized voting system, we want to extend it to entire democracies, really. So if you're a rockstar Kera dev, please, join our Discord, start chatting with us because we're always looking for cool people.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. Have a good day. And so and now we receive Tom live from a whiteboard with a bunch of mathematic things written behind him. And we are going to talk about 0.9. So thank you, Tom, for joining us. So as Nathan mentioned a bit earlier this week, version 0.9 of Cairo Lang and StarkNet Alpha was shipped to testnet. It brought quite a few changes. We covered some in the past community calls. We talked about contract as classes. There are a few others that were included in it, and it would be wonderful if we could cover what you think are the highlights of this release, what we should expect for the next one or the next period of time. Yeah, and after that, we'll end the community call with a few questions, and we'll talk about upcoming events.
Okay, great. So let me just make sure that my setup is working.
We can hear you.
Okay, but now I can hear you twice. I hope it's okay. Okay, so first of all, it's not mathematics, it's physics. I think specifically electricity. So I'm not sure why it's here, but in any case, let's start. So maybe, I mean, should I just go over the blog post, or?
I think that's a good start. There was this blog post was posted in the beginning of the week. I think a lot of people saw it. I'm not sure everyone dove into it. So let's post it back in the community call channel because I think it's worth going over. And more globally, what would you suggest to people is the best way to get up to, like when there's a new version, where should people look for insights on how this affects their smart contract programming pattern, how this affect their existing programming pattern? What's the best way to look for information?
So, good question. So first of all, knowing that something is out, so we are trying to publish it on every com channel that we have, the Discord, the Twitter accounts, both the StarkNet one and the Starkware one and the StarkNet intern. I think follows it very closely. And then we have the blog post and the release notes, which the release notes fully describes all the changes, though very succinctly. And the blog post deep dive into the most significant ones.
So it's the Medium post, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I just posted it on the community calls channel.
Okay. Just making sure, I mean, I hear you twice and just making sure that it doesn't destroys everyone.
If you have headphones, that's better. But otherwise than that, I think it's fine. For us, it's just a mild annoyance.
Okay, so give me 1 minute. I'm going to bring my headphones. Is it okay?
Yeah, it is.
Sorry.
Okay, so while Tom is out, I'm going to make a small interlude and I'm going to cover upcoming events. So we have a few upcoming events in the next few days. So if you're in Europe, we're going to do 2 meetups soon. There's going to be one on 21st of June in Brussels, meetup, and actually the guys from Snapshot will be there. So if you're interested in governance and you're in the region, join. There's going to be another one in Paris on June 23rd, and then we have a bunch of other events. I should have created a list earlier on. I saw an event. So tonight there's an event for Spanish-speaking devs done by Omar, who will teach you how to program Cairo. He'll do it in Spanish. Then there's a talk which is, let me check, in Chinese or aimed at Chinese speaker that will be online on June 16th. And that's for June. But then we'll have also a big series of events around HCC in Paris in the middle of July. So there will be various community events. We'll tell you more about it once news are out, but make sure to register. Regarding community calls, you might have noticed this community call was moved by 2 days for planning reasons. And the next one, it will be the same. It will happen on a Thursday. We'll resume to Tuesdays after that. I also want to mention that we'll probably start doing live streaming sessions to show people how to code or just to test this medium. We think it's an interesting thing to test. So the first session will be next Tuesday, and I will be showing you how to solve a tutorial that we released a while ago that is called Solve to Mint, which was done by Matchbox DAO and Topology. So if you're interested in solving Solve to Mint, connect at that time and I'll show you how to explore the black magic of Cairo's physics engine. And that's it for events. Tom, back to you. Can you still hear me twice, or is it any better or not?
I think I'm okay. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
I can hear you.
We can't hear you on Discord.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you. Yeah, we can hear you on Discord.
Can you hear me now?
Can you talk again?
Can you talk again?
Hello, 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 hello.
Yes, we hear you.
Yes.
Okay. So you were asking how to get to know everything. So knowing that a version is out is all the, I don't know, general media that we have, and then you have two places to see what are the changes: the release notes on the Carolang GitHub and the Medium post itself. And then for the actual technical details, we're updating our documentation, which are, at least for now, are in two places. And I know this is a big headache and not something that is very convenient, but we are working to merge both the technical docs of StarkNet, which I will post in a second, and the Hello StarkNet tutorial into one coherent documentation plus tutorial. And there you will also be able to see the highlights, changes on each new version, right? So this is the plan going forward, having one place for all documentation of StarkNet, which include both technical documentation and hands-on tutorials for new features, and a highlight for each version on what was actually changed. Okay?
Yes. Okay.
Okay, now I can't hear you.
I'm saying yes. Okay.
Okay, great.
So I pulled the blog post. So a big part of 0.9 is contract classes. I think we covered them in past community calls. So maybe if you want to cover them quickly, we can. Other than that, I think the biggest change after that is fees, right? Maybe we can talk about fees.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so the only change, so fees were first introduced in 0.8, if I'm not mistaken. And we introduced them along with all the framework that allows you to estimate your fee, and then also to add it to a transaction and actually be charged for it. But it was not mandatory because we understood it is a big change and we wanted to allow users, applications, and developers in general to adapt to it, right? So I don't know, if you used one of the SDKs, StarkNet.py or StarkNet.js, they had to adapt on the way they construct transactions to include the fee estimation and the fee as part of the transaction. So this was the time between 0.8 to 0.9, and starting 0.9, which was released on Gerly on Monday, fees are now mandatory, meaning that a transaction that is not paying fees will not be accepted, right? So those are the changes to the fees. Going forward, there are many things to change in that area. So first of all, right now we don't have fee auction, meaning users can't offer more fees if they want, for example, to be included earlier or faster, like you have on Ethereum. So this is something we plan to add in, not in the next version, but sometime close, because it is a very important mechanism to allow the market to signal how important it is for transactions to be included in a block, right? And also, we want to simplify and make it easier to understand how much should a transaction cost. And for that, we we're planning on unifying the parameters of Cairo steps and built-ins into one parameter, and everything which is related to L1 cost to different parameter, and have them both be very easy to calculate. So this is like the plans with regards to fees.
All right, I think that covers about all there is to cover in 0.9, which is already quite a lot, to be honest. I'm curious, so what's the next version? It's not going to be 1.0, so 0.10, something like that?
Yeah, 0.10. Actually, there will be a minor version, hopefully in no more than 2 weeks, which will include the parallelized execution of transactions in the sequencer, which was supposed to be part of 0.9, but unfortunately was delayed a bit. So we decided to release the version without it and to add it as a minor version somewhere, hopefully in 2 to 3 weeks. Let's say 2 weeks. Yeah, so this is the next version. It will have no impact on any user, but the throughput and the performance will hopefully be much better.
Okay, so it's mostly going faster.
Yeah, yes,
yeah, which is
basically
quite important. But
yeah, it's very important. Currently, the performance of the sequencer is the biggest bottleneck, in my opinion, of the network. Right? If you have, you can accumulate backlog quite easily. So we are working, and we will continue working on making it much better.
What's the current capacity of StarkNet, and what's the midterm and long-term expectation we have for the capacity to process transaction? I know transactions per second is a bad metric, but let's say swaps per second.
Okay, great. So you took my first sentence. So if we measure swaps per second, so currently the sequencer can process around 2 swaps per second, which is really low. And our midterm goal is 80 swaps per second.
What's midterm?
A few months.
Mm-hmm. Pretty cool.
Yeah. The long-term goal hopefully can be much higher. But it's really hard to make those goals. I mean,
yeah, exactly.
We know what can be improved, and we are working to improve it. It's very hard to predict how such an improvement will affect the actual throughput.
Exactly. And also, you could make the argument that since StarkX or StarkNet live on top of Ethereum, you could count these transactions per second on StarkX or StarkNet towards the capacity of transaction of Ethereum, because in a way it's secured by the same base layer. And if you extend that, once recursion is here and we have the ability to run a rollup on top of a rollup and to run a StarkNet on top of StarkNet, this is where you'll get a lot of increase in throughput and activity, all secured by the same layer. And there probably are limits, but they're blurry to me still. It feels like there's way more to build before we actually hit a wall in terms of throughput. It's true,
but you still the metric of the throughput of one single layer is still important, because
it is.
It still, this is the ability to have atomic composable transactions, right? So this is, in my opinion, it's very important to also maximize our ability to on that metric. But I agree with you that recursive layers is something that gives you the ability to do, which can open, I don't know, very, very nice things.
Very cool. Yeah. Look, I don't have any more questions.
0.9.
Yeah, sorry.
So this is 0.9.1. The next major version, 0.10. So there we're going to focus on implementing the changes to the account contracts as were described on Shamans. We can also link to the post that describes those changes, but basically this version will focus on implementing those changes. I can go over it very shortly, but basically we are introducing two steps to the transaction execution. One is a short and small step, which allows, in which the sequencer validated the user authenticated the transaction. And the second step is the actual execution of the calls or the multi-calls in the transaction. And this may sound technical, but actually it is very important to the protocol because it allows us to offer the flexibility of account abstraction while still maintaining the guarantee for the sequencer that it will get paid, and thus preventing those attacks on the sequencer, right? So this is the motivation for this change, and it is a very important one.
It's a mitigation for grieving attack, where you send transactions that are invalid but cost you nothing, and so you can DDoS the network.
Exactly. Yes, and we're also going to hopefully close few holes in the fee mechanism, which are one, currently there's no mechanism to pay for L1 to L2 messages, right? They are being subsidized by the sequencer. So we want to add a mechanism for that. And also there's no good mechanism for paying for account deployment, right? So the deploy syscall allows you to pay for contracts that you as the user wants to pay for. But how will you pay for the first account deployment, which is your account, first contract deployment, which is your account? So you can use some, I don't know, relay service and maybe sign in advance the transactions that later refund the service or something like that. But if you want to have a solution that does not rely on some external service, so this is something that needs to still be added. Yeah, so this is 0.10.
Very cool. Thank you. Look, I think that covers about all the questions I had for this week. Let's see if we can see some questions in the community call channel. And I don't see specific question. So I think we're done for this week. Thank you, Tom, for coming. And hopefully see you soon for next update. Thank you for your continued work on StarkNet. And to all of you listening to us on Discord or YouTube, thanks for your attention. I hope you learned something today. Looking forward to talking with you again in 2 weeks. And remember, we'll have a coding live stream next week. So if you're interested into that, make sure to tune in. And that's it. We're off for today. Have a good one.